Hi there, it's Ardith, and I'm here today with my card for this week's Splitcoaststampers Featured Stamper Challenge. I used my MISTI to turn my card panel. You've seen me do that a lot, but this time I used an old trick I've seen others use that allows you to stamp on a rectangular panel and put the center of the turn wherever you like. I have a 6x6 panel of craft cardstock, and I used a pen to mark the center. I use this for my Concord and 9th turnabout stamps, but you can use it for any stamps. I put down my white card panel in one corner, and I should have adhered it with temporary adhesive. I did it later once all the movement started to drive me crazy. I created concentric spring wreaths using Pretty Pink Posh's Bold Blooms set. I used mostly leaves because I wanted my card to be mostly green, for a fresh spring feeling. I drew in circles lightly with a pencil and circle dies, because sometimes I find that because I can only turn the MISTI 4 times, my wreaths can end up looking a little square, and the circle helps to ensure that they stay round. These ended up being not centered exactly right, but they were still a pretty good guide. I placed the first stamp near the smallest circle guide, and I inked it up with Catherine Pooler Twilight ink. These faint lines will disappear completely when I start coloring later on. Then I turned the square panel and stamped again, continuing until I had done 4. Here's where I finally taped that sucker down. Really, I should have done it in the beginning. It made life so much easier. I moved the stamp to the next circle and continued the stamping. I didn't stamp when the image would have wound up completely on the craft panel and not on my card. I continued working around the 3 wreaths, adding some flowers here and there until the panel was completely covered. I made sure to erase all the pencil lines at this point. Once they get trapped under COPIC coloring, you can't erase them. And before I started the coloring, I used the Stitch Notes rectangle die to trim down the panel. There's a ton of coloring here, and there's no point coloring things that won't end up on the card. When I color with Copics, I make sure there's 3 or 4 layers of paper underneath. If you color on a slick surface, that alcohol ink can pool and bleed back up through your panel. I used a palette of fresh spring yellow-greens for the leaves, and I worked my way all over the panel, adding darker shades for contrast and depth, and highlights with a very pale yellow-green. I added some blue-greens, some pinks for the roses, and yellows for the daisies. I felt the roses needed more definition, so I went back in with a darker fuchsia marker. Finally, I used a toner gray marker to add some shadows to the left and bottom of all the leaves and flowers. This is a really quick and simple step that adds to add even more dimension to the elements. Next, it was time for the sentiment. I used one of the tag dies from Stitched Essentials 1, and I placed it in my mini MISTI and lined up the Happy Birthday sentiment from Pinata Party. I stamped it with crisp black ink, and then I positioned it onto the colored wreath panel. To finish the card, I glued the wreath panel to a craft card base. I trimmed down the sentiment tag and popped it up with foam tape, and I added a sprinkling of sparkling clear jewels across the card. I hope you enjoyed this video. Shopping links are below and on my blog. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.